some background about how we got here, and then we'll turn over to Karen DeYoung, who's our consultant, who will be doing the majority of the work today during the listening session. Before we say this, though, one of the things about these meetings, how many have been to community meetings before? How many have been to community meetings before? I know you have interrupted some community meetings before.
That's right.
Okay, so
I
know you've been to community meetings. You've been to meetings where they said we want to listen to you and hear what you have to say, and after they listen to you, you said everything you want to say, none of that comes back. They say they've had you there, but nobody ever took into account the gist of what you were saying or the majority of what you were saying. We don't want to do that today. You've been to those two? Yes. One of the things today is this listening session is being taped and video recorded, so I want to make sure that you know that as well. This will be delivered to the council members, so they'll get a chance to hear directly from you about your concerns, about your suggestions around the work. And also, too, they'll get a chance to possibly incorporate those into their recommendations as well. So it's not just for the sake of coming to the north side and say we had a community meeting. It's about substantively taking that and bringing that back to the council as well. Karen also will be doing a summary of the meetings as well. So we'll have a written summary, we'll have a video summary, and an audio summary as well. So I wanted folks to know that before we get into the gist of what we're going to do. I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce some folks here who are actually part of the council. Let them introduce themselves as well, so you know who they are as well. So any council members here going to stand up and introduce yourself? Good.
I'm Nathan Golb. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Board of Police Officer Standards and Training. We're the state's regulatory agency that licenses and relicenses all the law enforcement officers in the state of Minnesota.
Hi, my name is Kevin Lindsay. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Human Rights.
And although he's not on the council, he had a large part in putting this council together. I want to have Melvin Carter introduce himself as well.
Thank you very much. I'm Melvin Carter. I actually work at the Minnesota Children's Cabinet for the Governor Working Organization. This is an issue, of course, that we've involved in before.
One thing I want to say too is we came to this council, the governor wanted to create it after the Philando Castillo shooting. So after the shooting occurred, as you know, there were many protests with the governor's residents. A lot of people were in the governor's house meeting with them. We met with a lot of community members, we met with Black Lives Matter, we met with law enforcement officials. We're saying we have to do something about this to make a change. As you probably remember too, the governor went on TV soon after this happened and talked about how racism played a part in what happened in Dallas Heights. Melvin, myself, Commissioner Lindsay, and some other folks from diverse backgrounds were just talking about things at the governor's house with him that he may not have experienced himself, and we gave him perspective on how some of these things come about, community relations and police, and how our different perspectives sometimes affect tragedies that happen and occur. Now, I want to say this, I want to commend them and others for bringing that lens, because I'll be honest with you, unless we have those conversations and dialogue, that lens doesn't happen. Some people will say, okay, we're going to do things this way. Some people say do things this way, and we never come together. That's important. So that lens allowed the governor to put together this council, allow me to be the person that's kind of managing the day-to-day of it as well. The council consists of 32 members. There are 15 voting members and 17 ex officio members. If you didn't get a copy of the front, the executive order that created it is up front. We tried to do a balance of those in law enforcement and also those in the community as well. The council members attend regular meetings. We've had, I want to say, 9 meetings of the council that put together the recommendations, and we'll have more meetings of the council to finalize the recommendations before they go to the governor. The preliminary recommendation goes to the governor on March 17th, and he's taken those into consideration. Some of those recommendations led to, or not led to, but some of those were a part of discussions with the legislature around police training or investment in police training as well. So the council has received presentations from community and also law enforcement about the impact of police training and other things that can improve community and police relations. The final recommendations are due June 30th this year, and then June 30th the council will automatically dissolve from the executive order, but it doesn't mean the work will stop. We will look at how we can keep that work from going on, keep it going as well, and not end on June 30th as well. The other background I'll give you as well, there are many other councils with community and law enforcement happening as we speak. I know at least 3 or 4 other jurisdictions organizations have similar entities working together to figure out what is going to do in a collective way. By no means are we saying that this is the only way that you can do it. Working as well, but from a state perspective, we want to see what investments we can make as a state in this area to determine what we can do better in those areas as well. I've been remiss because I didn't thank David Collier, who's my age, for putting this meeting together as well. And David, if you have any complaints about the meeting, send them to David. Anything that went well, come to me, and we'll go that route. David, we get in contact with you. Because we don't want you to just feel confined to saying that you should this meeting. If you want to participate further, definitely reach out to us. We add you to our mailing list as well. So we don't have a quick list, that's this old school. The camera's right on this one. So, that's just a little bit of background already. I want to say this. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention an incident that happened 3 blocks from here. Jamar Park was killed a couple years ago. And I'd be remiss because we intentionally wanted to make sure we came into the community and not ignore those things that have happened and occurred. As I said before, the Philando Castile shooting happened, and this was the genesis of this council here. All the fact that it happened to community, but also to law enforcement as well, has led to where we are. The other thing I wanted to say is, on behalf of the governor, lieutenant governor, they're very passionate and concerned about this issue from both sides of the perspective. They want to make sure that we address this in a way that's substantive for the state. The governor himself is tonight at a law enforcement memorial service recognizing, I think, the 287 officers who have been killed in the line of duty in Minnesota. So he understands the importance of addressing both sides of this issue to address law enforcement tragedies as well as incidents that happen in the community as well. So I wanted to just give a time to just say that we recognize the importance of dealing with this issue and the importance of things that happen, continue to happen in this community. The executive order I'm talking about, executive order 1609, you get a copy of it in the back. The actual council members are not in that executive order, just listed different agencies that were identified. Those agencies then selected people that they recommended for the council. And David, do we have the council members on the packet as well? So in the packet, in addition to the executive order, you have a list of all the council members as well. The recommendations, this used to say restore trust, but a lot of times that trust is gone, so you got to establish it to begin with before you can even talk about restoring it. And I'll say this from a personal perspective. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and probably more you want to hear about me tonight, but my interaction with the cops sometimes is positive, sometimes it's negative. And my perspective about police, I was halfway joking with some people earlier today. I said I lived in a neighborhood that remained nameless for now in Minnesota. I first got here, and every day they used to follow me home. Follow me home, make sure I got home safely, and then turned away. That was in my mind. I made sure that that's what I thought. But my perspective about police and law enforcement was a little bit jaded. I mean, it was about, my perspective as a black man growing up. And what I realized too is if we don't establish a place where we both come to the table and say, hey, there may be some what I call unconscious bias or implicit biases that I have bring to the table, and there may be some of our law enforcement that bring to the table, you can't establish that trust and build a relationship. So what we try to do in the council is have those kind of honest discussions and relationships to make sure that we're kind of building that trust together. We want to continue that in the community as well. Focus on procedure and social justice. I won't get into detail of that, but a lot of law enforcement agencies have looked at implicit bias, procedural justice, and social justice training for their officers. One of the things that I may have Nate talk about, if you're willing to, a little later is about the training bill. And what we're trying to do there as far as investing more money from the state, from the post-board level, to get more training around those things that would be impactful for the community and officers as well. Policies and procedures, we'll skip that one. Effective outreach and sustained engagement. The thing that I want to make sure that you're aware of too is, as I said before, these community meetings are not just the last stop for doing this work. So after June 30th comes, we want to make sure that we're not just saying all community engagement is over. We want to work with law enforcement and also community and say, how do we continue these dialogues and relationships? How do we make sure? All right. Man, I told you. So, And he's also a coach on the 6-time state championship Style Island basketball team. So he doesn't talk about that a lot. The other thing too is we want to make sure that we continue these relationships going forward. So part of doing that is not just having these big council meetings or having these community meetings, but how do we foster a relationship with, say, the 4th Precinct and members of the community? St. Paul community and members of the community. That's one of the things we want to do from a statewide perspective. And realize too that it's not just an urban area issue. This is affecting greater Minnesota as well. The other thing is identify best practices and resources in the state. Part of the work the council has done is bringing in people to listen to what they're doing and see what they're doing, see how we can do it differently. One of our main focuses in our recommendations that Karen will go over is diversity in recruiting and hiring. We want to make sure that our workforce and our state officers kind of reflects the changes in Minnesota and demographics. In doing that, we've got to make sure like how those best practices and policies look. We have quite a few presentations from law enforcement about some of those things that are working well. The working groups, I'm not going to go into detail here, but Karen will talk a little bit about this. We've broken down into 5 different working groups. One is on diversity recruitment and oversight. Another is on social justice reform. The police training work group. Community law enforcement, health and wellness. So we'll talk a little bit about that. That group looked at not only health and wellness from a law enforcement officer's perspective, but also too from the community as well. What are some of the mental health, community health issues that are concerning the community? That recommendation itself kind of fostered itself in its genesis from Black Lives Matter members who we met with at the governor's residence and talked about what do we do to invest in that. We've added some professionals from the community who are familiar with trauma-informed care and also other things about community well-being and health. And we've added to that council committee as well to do some work there. And the last is policy development and implementation work group. A lot of the things you'll see or hear about today can be either policies, rules and regulations, or possible legislation. But how you do that going forward is going to be important. You can have as many recommendations as you want, but you have to have implementation that works and makes sense for these things to kind of change.
Yeah. Or, I mean, yeah.
With the aim of the listening session today, create awareness about the work of the council itself, inform you about the process we're undertaking. I talked a little bit about that earlier, about that process. Share the recommendations, so we'll talk to you about the preliminary recommendations. Keep in mind, they are not final recommendations. They're recommendations that we're going to take your input and feedback from today and give to the council members to continue to work on. And then also, too, continue to get input feedback from the community. We do have a Facebook page. We do have other ways you can reach us. So if you don't have a chance to participate today, or if you know others that didn't, there are ways you can communicate to us as well. So I want to turn it over now to Karen DeYoung, and she'll take us through the discussion about how we're going to have that conversation today.
As Mr. Burrows said, my role is twofold. So part of it would be getting your feedback as a community members into the recommendations in the report that's presented to the governor, as well as working with the council members to help and correlate all their ideas that they're working separately as a groups. And so my part of my role is to work with these groups and to put together a report and to ensure that the groups that are working together, that all the different voices or perspectives are heard. There may be particular groups like the Criminal Justice and Social Justice Reform Board group might have recommendations, but they're members of the Workplace and Housing Policy Oversight. We also have feedback on those recommendations, so trying to put together all of that feedback in the report. So most of the time tonight will be spent looking at the recommendations, which you should have grabbed as you came in, and if you haven't, if you could make sure everyone has a copy. And then talking about anything else regarding policing and community engagement that you'd like to discuss. The first thing I want to have you do is to, if you have it, fill out the recommendations. And it's just going to take a few minutes to review the recommendations. Think about a couple different questions. We're going to open it up. What are your thoughts about the recommendations? Do they address the concerns that you have? What, if anything, will work well? And what if anything? So what overall thoughts do you have? Do they address your concerns, your recommendations? What do you think will work well? And what, if anything, is missing? So these are just kind of prompting questions. Don't feel like you have to address those questions specifically, but just as you're reading through the recommendations, they can help you think through. So we'll just take a couple of minutes to have you read through them, and then we'll open it up. And then, so does it matter what people stand for? Or do you want to stool around wherever they are. You can just stand in your place, and then also what I've just directed, you'll get questions about the recommendations, suggestions for the recommendations, questions about something else, suggestions about something else regarding to the city. Sometimes helps me to jot down notes as I'm reading. Feel free to do that.
I do want to make one statement. From here, I think that I don't see something about like, it's probably in the training, but something to do with active listening in the training.
I'm gonna, is that, so you're gonna have a question about what's in the document? I'm gonna have you hold that for just a minute, and then we have you stand up. I had a hard time hearing you, but once everyone else has had a chance to read it, maybe have you stand up and repeat your question. Appreciate it. Most of you are done. So again, as Mr. Burrows said, the idea is to have these, we had one listening session 2 weeks ago at Augsburg. We have this additional session and then 2 more, I believe, yet to be determined in terms of the location. So the idea is to get your feedback collectively, incorporate those, that insight into the report, giving it to the council, and then incorporating that into the report. Welcome. If you guys, what we're doing right now is people just have finished looking at the recommendation document and then opening it up for your thoughts, either on the recommendation or So what I would ask you to do is to stand up and then project so everyone can hear you and ask your question, make your comment. At the previous meeting we kept it to 3 minutes because we had a larger group. I don't think I'll have to do that real specifically this time because we are a small group, but I just ask that you respect the time so that everyone has an opportunity to speak. So, and you're in the back. Do you want to ask your question?
So I just see on the police training, conflict management and mediation, I'm just suggesting that in that, maybe implicit, it's in there already, that they utilize active listening skills very strongly with that.
So your suggestion is that they add active listening
Yeah,
skills as
definitely.
one of the training topics? Okay. If you could say your name too, please.
Sue,
Who?
Sue, S-U-E.
Okay, thank you. So if you, when you stand up, if you say your name, if you are addressing the recommendations specifically or just a broader topic, and then whatever it is you'd like to share. And we'll just, no particular order, whoever would like to stand up and, again, we're small. Yes, sir.
My name is Rich Stemming. I think there should be, cops, police sworn officers should be assessed and treated for PTSD. And the police should live in the community and the neighborhoods they patrol. Research shows, and it's mentioned in here, but research shows that having more women as sworn officers leads to more nonviolence. And that's the issue that we're talking about.
So your suggestion
That,
would be recruitment
this
of
violence
You don't believe
and
that?
nonviolence.
No.
That's what led to this
I
committee.
know some
I thought
led
women
to
would be
this
better,
task force.
no?
That's what the whole deal is we're talking about.
I'm biased too.
So your suggestion would
Thanks
be that
thanks
more
for being
recruitment of
biased
more
that way.
women.
Yes.
If you go next.
And cultural competency, that issue in training for the cops, that's a never-ending process. Cultural competency is lifelong, so it needs to be addressed in training, in the academy, and ongoing throughout an officer's career. Not only should new officers receive or have some volunteer training in service work in the community, but ongoing too. Why just the new officers and then when they've been on the force 30 years, you know, who cares? It has to be ongoing. They have to feel part of this. They have to change their mindset. And I know that you mentioned trauma sharing, but trauma, the whole idea of trauma, its roots, its consequences need to be trained, need to be in the academy and ongoing part along with conflict management, mediation, de-escalation, mental health, crisis response. That needs to be part of the continued training.
Are you
And I
talking
think-
about within a community trauma? Is that what you mean specifically?
Yes. And, well, trauma in general, you know, it has to do with the possible PTSD of officers also. I think that community police restorative justice groups would be excellent. So the community can begin to see that the cops are buying into this. You can't just talk about it and then, because our kids, our grandchildren will be sitting here having the same damn conversation 50 years from now. And we know this violence between the cops and the community, the African American community especially, has been ongoing for 4 or 5 centuries. We can't just talk about it. We have to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. And this gentleman will be next. I just want to say, I'm standing here talking to you, I'm not taking notes, but there are other people whose fingers are furiously moving who are taking notes in addition to the videotapers. So this gentleman here, and then you in the back.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jeffrey Aggie, and I'm with the Minneapolis NAACP. I noticed in the recommendations a few mentions of implicit bias. I think it's really great that the work that the council has done. My concern is the final product, that the word implicit bias be specifically mentioned. I know a lot of times in the conversation it can be changed for diversity training or certain things that don't mention explicitly implicit bias. So that'll be my recommendation to make sure that that word is in the final recommendation. And secondly, if there would be a place for training for explicit bias, I think many of times we give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and we know that it's not every single police officer who, you know, doing terrible things or are against the community. We know the community knows some really great officers, but in general, I think we make a lot of benefit of the doubt for officers where in terms of explicit bias. And so if there would be a place or recommendation for a training and screening for explicit bias as part of the hiring process.
Mustafa, I was the last session and yeah, thank you. I've been following you always. I'm passionate about this because it really is not easy topic because I grew up and born and raised in authoritarian ruler. With the police, I've been afraid. And then I come here and I see a lot of unfortunate police acting the same way. So a lot of my communities are nervous about all these police issues. So it's something that dear to my heart. So I have to always. Your recommendation we talked about last week, I'm not going back. But I think it should be added. Very important key here is police officers have an option to go to some trainings. And that's really ridiculous to me. They should do it, are forced to do it, all the training, no exception. Whether you have 50 years of have law enforcement expertise or have it just a new one, you should go. My profession, I get training. If I want to work, I have to get some training. Otherwise, I'm going to get a pink slip sheet. If I don't, every person should have accountability the same way. Police officers have been set up higher standard. And the money of this issue is because of their status. They've been given big status, not all the rest of the communities. There's men and women in uniform who die in this country every day, and they're homeless, and nobody cares about it. But the police officers have the higher standard, which is wrong. That's one thing. So the recommendation should be they have to go training, and that they should be monitored, especially when they're in college. Some of them might go college with them, and you have no idea when we have a discussion how they talk about the communities they're going to please. They already, it's their system. I saw that one in my own eyes, and then I say, I cannot believe these people are getting the uniform and serve the community. So you have psychologically, they have to go training like the rest of civilized nations do. Europe, Germany, France. They have to learn all that. So that's one thing they should be in recommendation. You have to know they shouldn't have a choice if they want to be police officers.
So are you talking about training in general, or are you thinking about specific kinds of training that should be required?
Psychological. Biggest one. Psychological, how to behavior. And so many other trainings that doctors go through, the engineers go through, they're training. So the police officer should take the same training because they are dealing with different human beings, have a mentally different status. So they have to know how to de-escalate a lot of issues, and no, that's one thing. And my other thing, which is similar, is that how you gonna know, and the already racist cops, you have to put the record up. So some of the records should be out. Here's one example. I'm gonna end with this. Here's a cop. This fact. He stopped African American young woman who she didn't have her license was suspended, by the way. But she had only one child because she was to go to grocery store to get milk. Because they already know the neighborhood, who she is and the cop. They follow her, they give her a ticket, they tell the cop. The same cops, week later, stopped white lawyer who got drunk, license suspended. They say, sir, they put him a cop boot, park his car, so he can get somebody pick him up. That is a definition of racism and bias. So how are you going to judge people like that and say tomorrow those people is going to be police officers? Yep. That is where the problem is. So unless you pick those bad apples, we already hear that every day, bad apples, we're all good. I know you're good, but as long as you are not taking out those bad apples, we're going to all call you bad because you are not taking out the bad ones. So how you deal with that? Thank you.
My name is Emily. I have three things. The first one, I think that it is imperative for not only police officers, but for the public to also understand that many people have a different relationship with police than we do in the city. I lived for a very short period in a small town in central Minnesota, and the police were community members, and they did things to help the community outside of just policing the community. If you had a flat tire on the side of the road, the first person to show up and pull over and to help you was a cop. If your car broke down, they would help you, push it out of the way. If you were walking in the middle of the night, they'd give you a ride. That's very different than what we experience in the city, particularly people of color. And I think that understanding that, and understanding that the perception that people in the country have of police, that's valid. That's their experience with police, and that's valid, and it's okay. They can think that of the police in their community, but the police in Minneapolis are not community members. By and large, the police in St. Paul are not community members. They have no ties to the community. They come and they police and they arrest and they abuse and whatever they do, and then they go home to their suburban life and go about their day without any responsibility, without any ethical tie to the community. Their grandma doesn't go to church with the old lady that they stopped and harassed on the side of the road. That's very different than in the country, and I think that people don't understand that, and they don't understand that difference, and that's relevant for police officers, but that's relevant for the public too, and that part of anything that comes of this needs to be educating the public as well as educating the police officers. The second thing, professional liability insurance. I cannot say enough that we should not continue to pay for officers who are abusive. However that works, if that means that their flat rate, if they don't have any violations, is something that the public picks up, fine. But once they start abusing people and we have to pay out because they are abusive, we shouldn't have to pick up that tab. That should be something that they have to deal with. Just like if I get a DUI and my car insurance goes up, they have to deal with that. Just like if a doctor gets a malpractice suit, they have to pay additional money so that they can continue to practice. Police officers should be in the same situation.
So, bust the union.
Police unions, that's not even really a thing. That police officers have a union is absurd because it's everything that unions are not, but no, I think that the union and professional liability insurance are separate issues, and that's not necessarily. But I remember very clearly when the residency requirements for Minneapolis were dropped, and I remember that because I had an uncle who was a horrible person who was a cop, and he had an apartment in the city that was a single room, dingy, an empty apartment, and all of the force did the same thing. They all still lived in the suburbs. What that residency requirement did was allow them to be public about living in the suburbs. But they were breaking the rule before it happened, and everyone knew that they were. The chief knew that they were. The mayor knew that they were. Everyone knew that they were. And it didn't matter. So whatever happens here, whatever things come about because of this task force and the next task force mean nothing if you don't enforce it.
What were those three of your points?
Those were the three. Residency requirements, professional liability insurance, and particularly between city and rural areas. Yes.
Yeah, my name is Jan, and I live in Minneapolis, and I notice here you have something on conducting data collection, including racial/ethnic breakdown on the number of stops and civilians injured by law enforcement. I've got to say that's wonderful, but I also have to say, where has it been before? this is a no-brainer that we keep statistics on this kind of stuff and that we, the public has access to them. I will say the city of Chicago puts everything online, all the information about their entire city employees, police salaries, how long they've been working, what kind of fences they have. Are we somehow technologically unable to do that in Minneapolis? I know we're not quite the city that Chicago is, but okay, I'm being sarcastic, but it bothers me. This should be, all the information should be there, and they should have been collecting data. How do you make decisions without that in this day and age? Okay, and there's a lot of emphasis you have on training. You can train the hell out of people, but if you never give them consequences, nothing is going to get better. Nothing. Thank you. Right? I mean, people have to have consequences. Now, police, I admit, they have a very difficult job. But it could be a very rewarding job. And most cops are pretty good. But because we don't get rid of the bad ones, people can join the police department and just do whatever they want to do. I mean, it's really insane. I go to the PCOC meetings, that's the oversight committee about the Civilian Review Board in Minneapolis. You should read the cases on implicit, when you're talking about implicit bias, I can't tell you how many times cops out there use the N word, they use the B word, they say the F word. This is not like really subtle stuff. Implicit bias is something that very little can be done about. Frankly, we all have biases. But actually trying to affect that is a lost cause, basically. I heard a scientist talking about it. He says, you know, you can train people. It's maybe good for 24 hours, maybe. Seriously. We need to be talking about the explicit bias that officers display all the time and get away with in the city of Minneapolis, and I know elsewhere. They talk about de-escalation. Is not the N-word rather inflammatory to people? Do you think that a black person hearing that is going to feel like being nice to an officer or cooperating? And there's an example just a while ago in St. Paul where a young woman was having a mental health crisis. She was at a facility for young women who had been sexually abused. She got out of control. They called an ambulance. The police intervened. They said, oh no, she doesn't need an ambulance. We'll go get her. She was called an effing B by the police officer, and he punched her in the face. I mean, honestly, I know that at least Chief Axtell is concerned about this, but this is an example. This is ridiculous. Folks need consequences. That's all there is to it. Well, there's more to it, but that's a big one, you know? It really is.
I want to make sure that is it in response to what she said or just something else?
Just something else.
Okay, let me just make sure there's not someone else. I want to not be a small group. It's a big deal, but let's see if there's anyone else who wants to speak.
Thank you.
I noticed also, like I think, not just me, but a lot of people notice that many times a lot of these councils, groups, forums have really great intentions and have oftentimes given great recommendations, but most of those recommendations are fought by the police union. And so even when you look at times where there are police chiefs or particular people who try to discipline a officer who has not done what they should or have violated some kind of a rule or regulation, that the police union will step in. And we all know that the police union is perhaps one of the strongest types of union in this country and maybe in the world. So we just wanted some transparency as to what are the odds of the kind of recommendations that we make, and what are the odds that they will actually occur. in terms of what are the odds that the recommendations will be signed into law, and those laws will be, I know that they won't necessarily be union-proof, but what are some of the protections that these do you guys have or know any protections that these recommendations will have in terms of implementation on the side of being fought by police unions all over this state?
And I don't know that we have the answer to that question. It's certainly in the notes and looking around this weekend, and I think that's something that we have to record.
Okay, for sure. With that, I have a recommendation.
Yes.
Is it possible for us to list publicly the amount of times that police unions fight particular cases where cops are clearly out of line? Make that information public.
I believe that the union movement in the history of the United States has been a benefit to labor. They've been advocates on the behalf of labor. But in police unions in Minneapolis, at least, they're an impediment. They're causing problems. The police chief needs to be able to get rid of officers that are abusing people, that are abusing their power. And in Minneapolis, there's apparently the union blocks that. So, I mean, didn't Hartold just try to fire somebody and the union overrode her? What's up with that? If the police chief can't even do it, who's going to do it? What are we talking about here?
Yep. The case that Jan was talking about was a little girl. She's
14.
14 years old.
Yep.
And it's on video. And no consequence. None. He was inconvenienced. She had to go to some meetings.
The police chief says he's going to do something about it, though, because he says it is unacceptable. I'm really glad he said that. But yeah. And you got to wonder about the jury too, that found that cop not guilty because her lawyer lied in court and called her a retard. His lawyer, the cop's lawyer, called her a retard, and I'm just flabbergasted at this kind of behavior.
And the only reason why I brought those things up is because we're talking about establishing and restoring community trust with the police. I think that those things go at the heart of why there's a trust issue. For example, if I were to get up and do something wrong at my job, that it's clear I would be fired, or if, and then a lot of times in the conversation, black on black crime is brought up, quote unquote. And if the difference is if I, a black person, shoot another black person, I'm going to prison. More likely, more times than I would get if I wasn't. But the point of the matter is, people trust police. When we talk about law and order, the idea of law and order, people trust systems that they know that there's a system of rewards and punishment. And oftentimes, the more fair those rewards and punishments are, the more trust people will have in that system. But when it comes to police officers and bad behavior, as far as it relates to the police union, they're on the side of, hey, it doesn't matter what this police officer did. And I understand their role. I understand the role of the union is to protect the officer. So I'm not, although I disagree with what they're doing, that's their role, to protect their worker, and so their worker would not lose their job. But the point is at what point does it become a public safety issue? And at what point is it that there's nothing that we're doing in this room? And the reason why I'm saying that is because my fear is we would have spent all this time, money, effort of all these wonderful people in the council, and it would be a waste of time for them and for the public, and it would erode trust even more if another incident happens after all this wonderful work that everyone has done, and then there's no consequences. Then what you will have is you will have a riot, because the reason why there wasn't a riot with Jamar was because a lot of community leaders stepped up and was like, hey, y'all need to calm down. And people would listen to the community leaders. The people that was doing the crazy stuff weren't necessarily part of the community, but as a community person and being connected with a lot of community leaders and being involved in community work, the idea of telling someone to be calm will no longer be able to do that. And so that goes to the integrity of what you guys are doing. It's not even the work that you're doing, but if those recommendations are just not passed or are continuously blocked, there will be no trust and it will be a lot worse. So just want us to really highlight the idea of the work of the police unions and the deterioration of trust or lack thereof with the community.
So there, again, I said this is a second group with the exception of the process.
Mustafa.
There's a different group, but I'm hearing a lot of the same.
And you're gonna continue to hear it.
Yeah.
Yes. I just want to have, he hasn't
Yes,
spoken
no,
yet.
I'm-
Yeah, because I can get more people to come to a protest than I tried to get some folks to come tonight. And they was like, why? We've been there before. You know, even if you put in a complaint, you can't, if nothing happens against the officer, and you clearly know by law he's broken the law, sometimes criminal charges should be, even if no one dies, you can't, even you as a person filing a complaint, can't get the results. How's that? You file a complaint and you don't know what they looked at, you don't know why, nothing was dead. So transparency is the key. And like I said, I could have got 10 people to go to a protest, and not one person I could get to come to this meeting tonight. They're saying, why? You know, we're going to talk, and it's like smoke in the air. It's going to just, nothing's going to happen. That's no disrespect to the council. I mean, we appreciate your work, but we should know why it's not why they didn't take the recommendation, and it should be public.
Yeah, here we are in the part of town where perhaps the police-community relationship is most volatile. And where's the cops? I don't see anybody. Are you undercover? You're not undercover, are you?
No, I'm not.
Why isn't there any officers here?
Well, because
Maybe they know that.
They know.
Inspector Frieselden would have been here. If he was
Touche.
the inspector, he would have been here.
Did you have, yeah, let's have this gentleman, he hasn't spoken yet.
Well, I mean, there's actually a statute in state law that gives a lot of anonymity to the actions of officers. I forget the statute number, but, you know, there's actually a point that any evidentiary material that's done within a police, the conduct of a police officer within the line of duty, that evidence is no longer available to be used in a criminal or a civil trial. So there's a whole statute that's clearly, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago. It's pretty uniform across the country. It was written a lot by the police federations and the police unions. And quite frankly, I don't know if there's even close to even enough will at the state capitol to even begin to change those laws right now. So a lot of it goes back to things 30, 40 years ago that are still on the books today. That, you know, there's not a political will to actually change that.
I think,
Yeah, we've been waiting.
I think I agree. What you're saying is perfect, right? And those are the things that we talked the last week. Is that, you know, the system that's set up, this is a Jim Crow era system, still existing. They changed a few things here and there, but it's the same thing. And that is what's going on. Because there's no, the police union and officer know that this is something backing them up. If we remove those kind of statutes, they will be come to table on their way to listen. So as long as we have people willing to change the system, like I said last time, it's all about the system. We need to correct the system and change. My second point here is that now we have a new government, Washington. Jeff Sessions yesterday, you know what he said, and I was listening actually to body language of the police behind him, not what he said. Everybody go listen, go back to the video. Look at the guys behind him, how excited they were to enforce that law. You can tell their faces. So what's going on and here, and what's federal doing? What are we going to do about it? Those every stats show the crime's down, everything, jail, people who go in jail are down. Now prisons are getting less and less populated. So the new sheriff in town, what are we gonna do about that now? You know, so I hope some of the recommendation we take back is like, the police should come out, flat out and say, we're not gonna follow the federal law. They shouldn't follow it, because that will harm more and more in the community what they're doing. So we know this has been targeted, prison pipeline, and now they're going back to again the system, and they use that against the innocent people. So I hope that's going to be part of what you're going to take back.
I think, I'm glad that Mustafa said that, because I think something that both of you kind of touched on is the blue line, and that good cops would be arresting bad cops, and they're not. And when they do anything that resembles that, they are targeted, they are removed from positions of power, they are put into community relations positions, and I think that accountability has to include that, and it has to include that retaliation against an officer that speaks out about abuses that they witness within their departments that have to be punished high. I mean, that has to be a priority. We don't see good cops because they're not allowed to be good cops, and I mean that's a reality. The minute that they say something, they're retaliated against. And I think the reality of that is all of these people that are asking for police accountability, Black Lives Matter and Communities United Against Police Brutality, and all of these different groups who, Isaiah, who are coming and want to do this work, we should be the best friend of good cops, right? Like, good cops should be excited about people demanding accountability by their crooked partners. They should be excited to bring some legitimacy back to their roles and some respect back to the badge. And we're not seeing that because of horrific leadership.
Was there ever legitimate? I think that's why the whole idea of
I'm sorry, yes.
That's why the council,
You are
I think that's why
absolutely
the council did a great job in saying establishing, because
establishing.
it's like when Trump says make America great again, it was
When?
never great for black people. So
Yes.
that idea of, I think, restoring means that there was ever trust to begin with when it comes to the police. And, you know, I'm going to continue saying this over and over again. My thing is that, you know, when you have a fraternity, like, the police system is a fraternity. And,
Yep.
I was in college, had a little great times, and, I'm not a member of a fraternity, but I know a lot of my friends that are members of fraternities, and I've been to a lot of fraternity stuff. And if you see a fraternity brother do something that, there was just this case in Pennsylvania, I think it was, where they was having an initiation, and the guy fell down, he died. Basically, he was dying on the floor, and they're like, no, don't call the police, because, you're gonna get your other fraternity brother in trouble. And the consequence that they're placed on these good cops goes beyond what you see on paper. It's the ostracizing, and it's all these things. So for me, I think, I'm coming from a place where I feel bad for these police officers. And oftentimes the narrative is the community against the police. It's not that. It's just we know the reality that, if you're wrong and you're in a fraternity, like, it's a fraternity. And I don't, and my thing is, not to be pessimistic, it's hard for me to see how this work that's being done right now will affect the fraternity mindset and will affect the police union. The police union and the fraternity mindset of police officers is the leading cause of why there's mistrust in our community. And until those two issues get addressed, they won't necessarily be solved. And those are issues that the police themselves would have to want to do and take that initiative. So that's why we're so grateful for the work that you're all doing here. But until the police themselves are willing to take upon that work, which they have no incentive to do so, then we're just wasting our time, because it's like fighting the war on terror. Terror is an idea, is a thought. Like when you blow somebody up and you drop a bomb, even if you think you're doing it for the right reason, you killed someone else. So now that their idea of terror, you're the terrorist, even though you're not. In their mind, you're the terrorist. So we're fighting a war of in this conversation, we're talking about an idea of restoring the idea of trust. Trust is not a tangible thing, and it's cultural, and it's all these things that what we do, I doubt that they will matter, because these police unions and the culture of the fraternity. And until we find a way to break that up, we're just wasting our time, to be honest with you, as far as it relates to trust. Now, we can do a lot of great things as far as reduce deaths and reduce all these things, hopefully, but they're going to still happen, because the idea about trust, like when I get stopped by a police officer, my wife cries. Even if she doesn't even know yet if the police is a good cop, bad cop, whatever, my wife is already crying. And so, you know, I'm already like, oh man, like I don't know what this police officer is going to do. And so the police officer could be a good cop and has never done anything wrong and whatever. I'm already, as a community member, feeling some kind of way that maybe he's going to do something because of the idea of trust. And so, I don't know, I know I said a lot, but it's just like, I'm grateful for the work that you guys are doing, but until we see police stations themselves taking up the work, it's not really a good sign for the community at large. Like, it's really not, you know what I mean? So, I don't know.
And like the gentleman said, it's a system issue. It's not just the police, it's the whole system. I went downtown to get some papers from the city attorney's office. And that worker actually told me, the secretary, we prosecute you. I'm just getting the policy of parking. We prosecute you. We're not your friend. Wow. You know, you're paid by my taxes, and I'm just coming to get a paper. I'm not a criminal. But she outright just said, look, we're not your friend. I'm like, you're here to serve me. I'm a citizen of, a resident of Minneapolis. But this is coming out of secretaries. And she looked at me and like I'm less than. I'm just coming to get the policy of parking, what the policy is. And that's a mentality of a lot of workers, whether they're police or court employees or just anything. I mean, we're people too. And if the police pull you over, and like the gentleman said, a mother with their kid, I've seen that too. Make them walk down the street with 2 and 3 kids. Police used to pull over, and you did have a lot of good cops that will get over and give somebody a ride or help them change their tire. People are dying when their car breaks down. That is sad. How we trust? And my kids did the same thing. Police pulled me over. I'm in a rental car, from the dealership, a loaner car, and my kid said, don't get out, they're going to kill you. Now, my kid's in the car crying, said, please, Dad, don't get out the car. How they growing up they supposed to feel, we used to have what they call officer friendly. A lot of police don't even talk to the kids. Some do, but the idea of what they say, especially with social media, our children feel that the police are the bad guy. They fear police more than they feel gang members on the street. Something's wrong with that picture. The police should be one to correct that. But they don't care. It's us against them. And the sad thing about it is a black officer out of uniform, it's the black man anyway. They don't know if he's an officer, he's a target. You have it where they can take down a woman. They out there giving each other high five. You just tackled a woman, regardless of what she did. They should want to change the public's opinion about them.
Especially interested to hear if there are people who have not spoken at all yet. I'm just curious if you have any comments about the recommendation.
I'd like to say a couple of things. First, my name is Deirdre. I'm a concerned parent. I would just like to address the elephant in the room, which would be this list of the council shall also include the following voting members and ex officio members. You have more people on this list than you have community members in this room. And there's a saying about teaching, like if a student fails, it reflects on the teacher. Your Facebook page, when you were pressured to put these meetings on a Facebook page because it's law. You did, but your May 15th meeting was down below and up above was May 25th. So I'm just saying that so it's on record. I would like to know if you have all these people from these communities and you have representatives from these communities, where are their communities? Have you taken your Facebook page and posted out to those communities? I'd like to know. I'd like the answer on your Facebook page so I see it in writing. Because this is a failure. This is disgraceful. It was Mother's Day yesterday. It's Mother's Day. 360 families in Minnesota were grieving yesterday because they lost people to excessive deadly force by the police. And whoever was throwing around the number 200, whatever, of police officers fallen, I want someone to tell me, was that by violence by civilians? Because I believe that that number includes someone having a heart attack in their car. So let's just be clear about this. We're not showing up here because we don't have anything to do. We are fed up. And you people are being paid. And there's a whole bunch of you. And if you think we're going to let June 30th come and go very quietly, you are so very wrong. You are so very wrong. I would like to go through a couple of these things because these recommendations just look so wonderful. I would like to know, I really would like to know how you're going to get there. I'd like to see on the Facebook page how you are going to get to these recommendations, these primary recommendations that you gave. And I also would like to bring up and put on record that the organizations that you have on your big committee for the governor have a contract back from 2001, I believe, that they're still following regarding all of these problems. It's 2017. They're following the same thing. It's just so sad. This is shameful. I mean, I'm embarrassed for you guys. I am. I'm embarrassed for you guys. Talking about police-community relations is a moot point. I want to see police accountability. I want to see police transparency, and I want to see consequences. There's been, in the 15 meetings that you have had, there has not been one community organization that has presented all of you people being paid at those meetings, but you have had government organizations being paid, and I was unfortunate enough to see one of them call Communities United Against Police Brutality. They've been doing this for 30 plus years and they have data. They have evidence-based facts. Please go to them. With the recommendations that you have there for primary, I would like to see posted on your Facebook page what evidence-based facts are given by each of your little task forces that you have there. I would like to see evidence-based facts for those recommendations and how they want to implement those.
You mean facts that they use to come up with the recommendations or how they will be implemented?
Both. Both. An independent prosecutor in police investigations, as well as a complete only civilian review board should be in place with sole responsibility for overseeing investigation and prosecution, not in tandem with what's already set up because it doesn't work. There has only been one officer in the history of the state of Minnesota being prosecuted, and that's happening right now. So let's be real about this. You need to prohibit bulletproof warrior training. It continues the us versus them attitude that feeds into bias, profiling, and misconduct. Training dollars shall not be allocated to such courses. which are often taught by unqualified individuals and organizations. Recommendations in peer intervention. For example, the International Ethics and Leadership Training Bureau. I believe that James Burrow had talked about not reinventing the wheel. So why don't you go to places who are doing this without any question of who's scratching whose back. Go to the International Ethics and Leadership Training Bureau. This training empowers officers to intervene and assist fellow officers to avoid and engaging misconduct. Recommendation to increase funding for employee assistance programs for law enforcement officers. Your preliminary report includes no recommendation that directly addresses present lack of accountability for police misconduct. It's nowhere in there. Police insurance and also pension decrease are two possibilities as far as taking money out of their pension or having police insurance for misconduct. All Civilian Review Board, I think body cam, if you're gonna have body cam footage, it should be available to the public. The Police Federation and the Post Board are obviously at the root of everything that we're talking about, unless you are willing as this task force to hold their feet to the fire. Really all that is happening is just a lot of hot air, which is really disgraceful to those families. And it's been brought up in the community having a 311 number, which people will call when someone is in a mental health crisis. There are people who actually say, don't call the police. So there should be a 311 number instead of a 911 number. And maybe EMS gets sent out with a mental health professional. If police want to be backup, maybe that's a possibility, but that has to be changed. That has to be changed immediately. It has to be changed this summer. And I would really like to see what you come up with as far as your code of silence. I mean, that's really such a problem. I mean, look at these names. It's like the young Native American 14-year-old girl, Frank Baker. After Frank Baker was beaten, kicked in the lungs, collapsed lungs, canine, mauled, he will never walk the same again. That officer, Suchere, was fired, brought back because of arbitration from the union, and then I believe the names are Joe Dick and Tony Spencer, people being pushed out of the department and offered transfers because they're speaking up. So if you really want to have a change, please post it. I would like to see what you folks are doing to really create change with something that is corrupt and that is still continuing to be. This is, as far as public health goes, public safety, your police are a public safety and public health problem. That's what's happening. So unless you have really concrete evidence-based things, all of you, I hope, go home, and when the next one happens, I hope you remember how empty this room is, but how much will weigh on you, because all the talk is all that is. I've met the moms. This is disgraceful. If you're really gonna do the work, really do the work. Piss some people off. Let me see you piss some people off. And then maybe you can talk about trust in the community. But don't put this on the community. This is not the community. This is on you guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to piggyback on it. Since he just wants to make an announcement, and then you can certainly go.
Yeah, in an attempt to try to cover everything that you were saying, I set up a second audio and I tried to switch the batteries out, and I literally erased everything that was said before you talked. In an attempt to try to fix that, I will stay after If anybody would like to come up, I'll stand off in the corner here. Please, I would really appreciate any comments that you talked about during this. Come over and speak to me directly one-on-one with the camera. I'm in an attempt to try. I apologize greatly for that. I haven't done that in 17 years, so I apologize.
Do you have contact information?
Yes.
I have to take off, but
Yes.
if I can get that.
And I will come to you.
I want to add that I'm an extremely active community member. I've seen both of you guys at various meetings. I had no idea about this until this afternoon when these guys told me, and they only knew about it because some other community member just happened to hear about it. That's pretty shameful, like in this day and age, for me to not know about it. Like, yeah. You better.
Yeah, there's a couple people.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure people
No,
haven't spoken had a chance to talk.
Right on.
So how about you in the front here?
I think this is great. I would just say, just kind of building off some of what has already been said, it's probably important to do a deeper grassroots dive to reach out to grassroots community, making sure that you're utilizing a variety of media sources or outlets to make sure that these meetings are well publicized, well in advance. And then also in terms of partnerships and people to participate, make sure that it is people representative of the communities that are impacted the most by police brutality. So.
And in the front here?
I also agree with publicizing the work that you do. I actually think that's a plus for everyone to know what kind of changes come out of the meetings. And I was, my name is Rosina Fuller, and I'm with the Hennepin County Local Advisory Council on Mental Health. And I spent a lot of time talking to folks about the fact that, from what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, all of the police in Minneapolis are getting CIT training. I don't know if anybody here can address that. Do you know if that's true? Is anybody?
It is. Yes.
Okay.
I work for the city of Minneapolis. They are getting CIT training. They're getting procedural justice training.
Can you just say, if you wouldn't mind, a little bit more about what that means to me as a community member?
Define CIT because
it's crisis intervention training. So to address, I mean, the goal is to address some of the mental health crises in a health way, as opposed to coming in as heavy-handed as law enforcement. I can't tell you what the training actually looks like.
Okay.
I can connect you with somebody that can.
Okay.
I can speak to the procedural justice training. I've attended 2 modules of that.
Okay.
Where that's the goal there, is for officers to be able to encounter the public in a way that preserves dignity with people. So, and explaining, like, why am I stopping you? What is going on here before, and how to also de-escalate situations as opposed to escalating. And then also it's working on some of the implicit bias issues. So what are the tapes that we play in our head? And how does that present itself in our work? And how do we recognize we're doing that and stop I just do almost like a self-intervention to behave differently in a situation, because we have a preconceived notion of what's gonna happen here based on any number, gender or race or neighborhood that something's happening. So, but yeah, I wasn't trying to get on camera. I was just trying to come and listen. But I do know that those things are happening in the police department. So
I think she wants to finish.
No, but I'm okay.
I was just gonna say there's actually a pretty good article in the last months, I think like around April 20th or so, Pioneer Press, about St. Paul, about how that CIT training has happened at St. Paul.
Okay.
So if you Google that you can find that on their website as well.
Thank you. And that was an important question because I know what CIT training is, but I think that's some of the good news that the average person in our neighborhood doesn't understand. And so I think telling the truth about the good work that you are doing is critical, because we're at a critical point in our history. And I just want to say that that there is was a community member that was, according to the Augsburg College security, they were acting peculiar. And so they wandered off of Augsburg College campus and were walking in South Minneapolis, and somehow the gentleman ended up dead, shot, unarmed in an alley. And what was later put in the paper was that he was off his medications. And so I think that it's just important that the police have the CIT training, and also important that the data, and I'm not sure what that data looks like, is collected so we can see if in fact that's helping people not get help with mental health issues by entering into the criminal justice system. And then the other thing I want to say briefly is that Mr. James Burrows, you have my name and phone number on your phone today, because I thought I heard something on the radio about this meeting, but I wasn't quite sure if it was today. So I went on websites, I could not find it, because if I found it, I was going to post, copy it and then put it in an email and send it out. And so you'll have that message on your phone. But I just think in terms of how we let the community know, there could be flyers upstairs. I post flyers upstairs all the time. So that's just a basic question. Is there a flyer upstairs saying something about this meeting, or is there, because I normally pick flyers up and hand them out all over the community, and I was at a play yesterday that had 300 or 400 people there. I would have loved to hand this information out. But I'm one of those people that's saying I feel like somehow there was a disconnect in information, and I think it'd be helpful to know where it got posted, and that's the message I left on your phone, sir. I just didn't know where to go and get the information, and after looking for I just kept looking and going on websites, and I saw different meetings, not this meeting. So then finally I called the Urban League, and they said something's here from 2:30 to 8 p.m., but that's not what I heard on the radio. I don't think. It could be. But anyhow, so I just want to say that still goes back to less of a complaint and more of how do you highlight the good work? Because to me, this is a good conversation, and this is actually good work. And I love when the gentleman said, I don't mean to be pessimistic. Well, you were very pessimistic when you say this isn't working, it's not going to do any good until this. Because I think that every conversation is good, just to have a conversation about it and to hear from other voices. And people's hearts and minds and what's really happening. Because when you live here on the north side, you're living it and you're talking about it all the time, but you don't know always if you're talking about it to people who are actively trying to improve the community, or is it a venting session? And so I'm just happy to be here and happy that I knew about it. And would have liked to share it with my friends and with my network, but I just couldn't get clarity on exactly what was happening, if there was an agenda, what was the best time to come. Some people might leave work early, some people might come after work. And so I just canceled the appointment I had and came in hopes that this was really going on. So thank you very much.
Yes, just another thought. There's always these great kind of conversations, and they're very high level, and what happens a lot of times is that they get stuck in the high level. And so great recommendations. I think it would be nice if there's some kind of strategy outline of how does it trickle down to the community, because there are some good things happening within the department. There's some things that I'm personally doing, but it's important that the community gets to know what's happening, because there's different conversations going on. There's conversation in the community, and then there's conversations on these councils and things, and nobody's talking to each other. And so it's important that it gets down. And then what are the action steps? What is the call to action? How do we change the conversation grassroots? How do we change the perception within the police force about community? And how do you change the perception of community about the police force? And I don't want to negate what the brother had mentioned, because those things happen. And unfortunately, it is negative. And so I think to really deal with it, you have to look at what is wrong and then come up with some solutions and then make sure you incorporate the community in implementing those solutions. Thank you.
There was comments before about how I related it to human behavior, how cops aren't going to rat on each other. So it's not surprising to me, considering the historical trauma that's happened between the cops and the community, especially in the community here in this part of town, that there's not more people here from this community. You know, they've seen it before. They've been to these meetings over and over and over again.
Exactly.
Nothing's happened. Nothing's changed. Same old, same old. So let the white folks come and talk about it. You know, just like always. And it strikes me that here, I'm assuming mothers and young sons, but I may be mistaken. But right here, and not necessarily this year, but eventually, they could be talking to their sons about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, the existential things that these young men are going to face. But no, they're going to have to talk about what to do when the cops come.
Yeah.
Already had that.
What's up with that?
Right.
Why is that? Why is that?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, Ray, it's good to see you.
Good to be here.
I just found out today you're running for mayor.
You're one of the last people to know.
I did not know that. I don't get to vote for you this time. That makes me sad. I didn't know you were running. But I'm glad to see you. And I wanted to mention him publicly because I see him when he's running and I see him when he's not. And that's important to me. And I see him when the big officials are around. I also see him up when it's just 5 or 6 of us up on Glenwood at the living room with Kirk Washington, and listening to us and talking to us and responding. I just wanted to say that. That's important to me, that you're here. And I get letters and calls from you, and that's important to me that you're here. I just wanted to say that.
You know, if I could just echo it too about, I mean, people need to see things happen. I mean, as was mentioned, we hear these conversations every 2-3 years about what needs to change and what needs to happen, and nothing changes and nothing happens. So I don't know. I mean, I think it would be really good for the working group to say we need to pick out 3 or 4 things, and we're going to put all our energy in making change or having a significant impact in those few things, because otherwise it's, you know, I mean, I read through, you know, the preliminary recommendations. They all sound good. I mean, that's, you know, most reports, they all sound good. So I'm sure if we looked at a report from 3 or 4 years ago, it'd be real similar. So I would just recommend that the working group say, we're going to tackle a few things and we're going to tackle it. We're not just going to talk about them, we're going to tackle it.
Would it be the idea of having the recommendations but having sort of a separate section or a prioritized? Would that cover what you're suggesting? Or are you saying just kind of scrap the list under the various working groups and just have
No, I think you can keep the list, but you could say these 5 things are things that we're going to try to make movement within 12 to 18 months. And here's going to be the metrics by which we're going to determine if there's been movement or not. And then having a plan on how that's going to be. If it requires legislation, how we're going to move legislation.
Yes.
And that's going to be hard because you're going to have to get police on board too. Because once, you know, Mr. Flannery decides this isn't good, it may not go anywhere. So the question, you know, I mean, this year, you know, we were able, and I don't know where it's going to end up, $10 million for officer training around issues of implicit bias, de-escalation, and identifying, you know, mental health crisis events. I mean, those are all really, really important things. Now, could there have been a lot of other money around lots of other things related to that? Absolutely. But I mean, I'm going to keep going back to the legislation that we have in place. I mean, it really gives a lot of sort of the upper hand to officers in their conduct and behavior so that they're somewhat immune.
Yep.
And then let's start talking about the culture. Because if this isn't a 10-year plan to change police culture, we're going to be back here 10 years from now.
I know I spoke too
He's
much.
been having his hand up for quite a while, then I'll come back to you.
I will add it also, please next time invite the youth. You need more youth to involve. So this it's a lot affect more the youth than anybody else. And they have to say something too. So, and the youth have to involve and listen to them and take their recommendation and then I think we hear the same brother said, and then I said last time and I'm gonna say again, accountability. If you don't hold anybody accountable and transparent, none of your work will ever go through because it will lead, that's the foundation of everything. If you know the police officer don't have accountability, whatever he or she is actually doing it, and then they have a lot of them, I personally believe, I'm not any biased against the police, but I only judge them what I saw, my own eyes. I don't judge what I see, the TV or any other. And there's a lot of bad dudes up there. And then I think what they're doing are not right. You know, I was, if I shared it personally, these are tactics that they use. And when I was here 22 years ago, they stopped me in the same area, the same police unit that killed Philando Casio, San Antonio. I used to live that side. They stopped me with the other 4 guys. The other 3 was African American or white. Oh my God. They put all side of the street, 37th Street. That's how you dehumanize another human being. All these flashlights. So like, what happened? I mean, I'm in a country that's 8 months. I'm terrifying. I was like, what happened? So they put you side of the street, you sit down there, everybody walking by, look at this old 5 black men has been side of the road, you know, and that is what they do practically. That's how they dehumanize another human being. You know, make less than human beings. They show that this is bad people, look at them. Then I stand up and he says, sit down. Joe is gonna say, like, for what? And then he looked my ID and he said, 30 seconds, you go. Not apologize. This is why we stop you. This is what happened. And he just picked me single because he know my accent. He knows I'm a new guy and he looked at my record and said, probably figured out something. And he said, you walk away. And then I walk from the Highway 88. Still I remember, this 22 years ago. Highway 88 and the 37th all the way to Central Avenue. Then they come in and they tell me, oh, you respect this and bad, good guys. I didn't see any good guys over there. I did not see. And when you see, and this is one of the 2 stories I have, 10 of stories personally. And then I document everything happened. Me personally, I document what I see. As long as there is no accountability, whatever you guys do, good luck to you. God bless you. It won't happen. This same thing 1967. The same issue we have here. Same thing. Few phrases have changed. So wherever you guys go back, put up the right issue and the right people has to speak up. Now there's few groups that polish and have a few words to say. People has to honestly speak out the issue. And there has to be honest discussion. Otherwise, everybody loses time and wasted money. 10 million you put on there, it's not going to change anything, nothing, unless there's no accountability. Thank you.
As a community member, I just want to say that there is a difference between my encounters with the St. Paul Police and my encounter with police on the north side, and my encounter with police in Robbinsdale. And I think I got my ticket last year on Ash Wednesday. Where is General Mills in Plymouth? Anybody know? Where's General Mills? Golden Valley. So that was Golden Valley when I got the ticket for driving too slow. On Ash Wednesday last year. I just want to say, I think, the reason I think it's doable and that these changes are possible is because there's such a difference when I encounter the police in St. Paul and I encounter the police in Minneapolis and Golden Valley. And I think I've been living north since '69, I think, and before that it was in the Rondell neighborhood. But if I go to the Rondell Days celebration, when I went to Philando Castile's repast, when I go to the Selby Jazz Fest, I encounter police at things in St. Paul. It's just a completely different experience. So I don't know if St. Paul has the same policing challenges that we have here in North Minneapolis, but just simple things as a hello, how are you? I take my grandson's 4. Everybody wants to, they treat my grandson like he's a king. They treat me like I'm a queen, and maybe they're not treating me like I'm a queen. It could be they're just treating me like a human being, but my treatment in Minneapolis by Minneapolis police is so horrific, and my encounters with them, and when something great happens, it's such a surprise that I'm normally congratulating the guy. Oh, glad you're here. Look, I get all excited because I'm so surprised that I'm not being mean mugged, which I remember when I moved back from Jersey in 2008 and I went to, I think it was 2008, but I went to Juneteenth when it was up on Glenwood. And the environment had changed because we had a new crop of folks living in the neighborhood that didn't value the neighborhood. And I saw that. I saw them kind of coming in later in the day and making Juneteenth into something not family friendly. But what was surprising to me is I was just as fearful of the police as I was of that group of folks, that small contingency of folks who were being disrespectful and loud and drinking, because of the way the police interacted with me. Even if I went over to talk to a police officer to just say, thank you for being here, you know, I'm like, what's all this, what's going on here? Why am I a threat? Stating, I just think it's critical to celebrate and be as loud about what you're doing well. And that's what the St. Paul police do well. Any encounter I have with them is positive. And there's just a way that they carry themselves, like they actually are the police and you're not a thug. And that's just common courtesy to greet someone. And may I help you if they think you're lost, or to say hi to my grandson. And I've had reason to be concerned about the St. Paul police, but because I have had a negative encounter with a family member that's dear to my heart, has had a negative encounter with them, but all of those positive encounters cannot be offset by the one negative, if that makes any sense. So just that on the ground experience, that grassroots experience of being in community with police who are here to protect and serve and to make sure we're all safe, that just comes across in general conversation, a general way of being. I was up at a cafe on Broadway and I saw a police officer that I had been in a prayer group with, and when I walked over to him, he stood up, he hugged me, the whole room almost froze. I mean, they were talking and then got real silent. Like, what is this going to be? And then I kind of went back to my seat and he went back to my, I mean, you don't see that real often. But the fact that he had been in that group with other community leaders and that we had all prayed together gave us an instant connection. Not saying I don't know anything about how he stops people, but I'm saying just being in that same space, connecting with one another and hugging and just a general greeting, it changed the whole atmosphere of that cafe that I was in. And some people were scared and some people had a sigh of relief. Like, is this gonna be an encounter? You know? I just think it's doable. Just wanted to say that.
I'm gonna have one last comment. We're supposed to end this part at 6:30, so I'll have you have your comment. Is there anybody who hasn't spoken?
I just remember one thing I want to say. Just one.
She's had her
go ahead,
hand up for a
please.
while, so we'll do that, you two, and then we'll close unless there's someone who hasn't spoken at all who wants to speak.
Bringing up the St. Paul Police, I would like to bring up a name. I don't know if anyone knows who Kimberly Handy Jones is. She is the mother of Cordell Handy, who was murdered by the St. Paul Police 2 months ago in the middle of the night during a mental health crisis. There is a federal suit filed against the St. Paul Police Department right now, right on the heels of paying out $2 million to Frank Baker, who is traumatized for the rest of his life. So I would like to bring in the next listening session and really not just have you hand this out at the beginning, but there should be some livable, breathable ideas for these listening sessions. There should be, this has to change. This has to change. This is your responsibility. This must change. The feet need to be held to the fire, period. These policies need to change. And if it's about the union and the post board, there's a post board member on here, there's plenty of police officers on here. I would like to see what you folks are doing as far as changing that dynamic, because that is what everyone here is suffering. And having a lot of stories is one thing, but if you think that people are gonna go away when the summer months get hot and something else happens, you are wrong. It's not gonna go away. You need to show us what you are doing. You need to come to these listening sessions, not just with this printed out every single time. There needs to be, like Ray Dan had said, there needs to be, in the next 3 months, this is what we're gonna tackle. These seem to be the things that most people were talking about at these meetings. This is what we will implement. This is how we're gonna do it. I want to see that, and I wanna see it posted on the Facebook page.
Thank you. Did you have a final comment?
Yeah, my final comment, I just want to read that. I believe you should focus, first priority will be how to dissolve the unions. That is the biggest obstacle. Whatever you guys do, that's the biggest problem you face. Because, you know, it's funny how the system, this country works. The military who go to war, fight, don't have a union, and they have higher standard of ethical and everything. We have a cops who in a trial, the bully military, killing injured enemy combatant. You don't even allow to kill them while they're injured, or they're surrounded, put their hands up. Here in the cities, police are shooting innocent people who don't even have anything. And they know that cops, the union will stand up beside them. We know exactly when the Jamal Clark with this union in Minneapolis. And they bring back again, because we know exactly what system he follows. He doesn't follow the police system. He got his own system. He have another group at night. He get ideas from. So that has to be number one priority. Number one goal should be how to dissolve these unions. Yeah. As long as that not exist, it's getting bad. You know, I talked to in Oakland, California, when I went there, one of the police. One of the police officers in Oakland, actually, they speak out now with this issue. Before, one of the cops said, if I stand up against the police, they might even execute me. That was in the 90s in the police, California. So they have a big union. That has to be number one priority, period. How to dissolve it. Thank you, the hard work you guys doing, and I hope you make a difference.
Thank you for everyone for their input. So the idea behind these sessions is to go to different areas and communities and to summarize the feedback. And as I said before, I've heard a number of themes, both from the last meeting and this one. And then the council members will take that feedback, apply it to the recommendations as it makes sense, and then that will go into the final report. So the idea behind each one is that ideally we're having a different group of people at each session. So for many people, they're seeing the recommendations for the first time. So it's their opportunity to give their feedback. So yes.
So is there a expectation that council members will attend any of these sessions? That's my one question. And then also, given the turnout, will there be any additional efforts to reach back in? I mean, I think it's very critical that more voices from this community are heard.
Mr. Burrow, do you want to respond to that?
Sure.
The first one, I know that there were 2 council members here today, but go ahead.
So the idea is to have as many council members attend as can. We realize that some of them are legislators and the end of the session and those kind of things are taking a priority. So that's why we tape and audio tape them to play for the council members, so even though they couldn't physically be here, we encourage them to be here. The second piece is, yes, we want to do another one of these. We're going to do the next one, I think, is at Wellstone, David, May 25th?
Yes.
We're going to do another one in June as well. So it's not the last time you'll see it in the community.
I mean, I was asking specific to the north side though. Is there going to be another opportunity? And like people like me or Anika or any of the, like, you can call us. We'll get people here.
The answer is
Just
yes.
reach out to us.
The answer is yes.
Just give us a little notice.
The answer is yes. We will talk after the meeting. The answer is yes. Let's make it happen.
Thank you all for your input and I appreciate your passion and your commitment to the community, to the people of the community. So, yeah, we will move forward, and I'm not sure. I guess keep looking at the Facebook page for updates in terms of how the additional meetings and when the report actually comes out at the end of June, which is the deadline for that. So thank you. I was going to say eat more food, but it looks like they took some of it. Thank you very much.
And I'll be here too.
Oh, yes, and for those of you who who spoke earlier but got cut off or erased, feel free to come up.